Megan McArdle is a writer for the Washington Post. She's also an economist who spent over 20 years studying institutional failure. In my conversation with Megan, there were three things she said that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. First, that the committee responsible for the rollout of the COVID vaccine reviewed their own research which showed them the plan to save the most lives, and yet they chose a different one. They called that equity. The second thing we talked about was that the more generous a Social Security plan is, the fewer children people decide to have. That means the most generous welfare nations on the planet are actually committing demographic suicide, one generation at a time. And finally, the $36 trillion US national debt, there is no painless solution. Somebody has got to pay. Somebody will be hurt. The only question is, who will it be? I'm Big John, and this is the Big Questions. Let's get into it. The national debt just crossed $36 trillion. Interest payments now exceed what we spend on national defense. And Washington's best and brightest keep telling us it's all manageable. With the right plan, the right people, the right policy, we can fix things. But what if the problem really is the best and the brightest in Washington? My guest today has spent two decades arguing carefully, rigorously, and often at personal cost that our experts are overconfident, our institutions are exhausted, and the math we keep ignoring doesn't care about our politics. She's a Washington Post columnist, an economist by training, a writer by instinct, and one of the few people who will actually tell you what a policy costs, not just what it promises. Today, we're going to talk about failure, incentives, and why the systems we trust most may be the ones least capable of saving us. I'm Big John, and these are the big questions with my guest, Megan McArdle. Megan, how are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. How about you?
I'm hanging in there. We get to a certain age, and you're just happy to wake up in the morning, and I think I'm at that
Indeed.
stage of life right now. But let's start with in reading over your bio. Starting out, you're a native New Yorker, like myself, I believe.
That's right. I grew up on the Upper West Side, 94th and Broadway,
Uh,
and went to good old PS 166, and then finished up at Riverdale.
oh, excellent, excellent. Actually, I was Riverdale adjacent. I grew up in the Bronx in Kingsbridge, so I was right off of Broad.
Uh-huh.
So most of my friends were in the Riverdale area, somewhere near Capock Street. So I don't know if that's where the school was, but anyway, uh, good to have a fellow New Yorker. So let me ask you this: as a fellow New Yorker, how did you deal with the overriding liberalism of New York City, especially?
Well, when I was growing up, I wasn't very political, and to the extent I was sort of generically left wing. In college, I think I flirted with the idea of becoming a socialist briefly. In one heady summer, I read a collection of the complete works of Karl Marx that a neighbor had given me when he was moving. I actually don't know where he moved, to Florida or to something. And they were falling apart. I don't actually remember. It was more of a stunt than a serious inquiry.
Right,
I remember very little except for the massive sections of Capital where Marx is whinging about worker housing and how bad it is. Which I later learned. I mean, the funny thing is, like, I go back to that now, and it's actually one of the most valuable parts of Marx. It's this incredible archive of what life was like for people in the early industrial era. Um, and then I went to college, and I kind of drifted into libertarianism, and then I just kept quiet about it. I was pretty good at passing. I didn't lie. I was just very good at agreeing with people about the stuff where I agreed with them and not talking about the stuff where I didn't,
a passive libertarian, as it were.
as it were.
As it were, yeah. Okay, and what's interesting is you 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 started out as someone who was interested in literature, right? You have a literary background. Um,
I took an undergrad degree. I had a minor in economics, but my undergrad degree was in English and creative writing. That's correct.
Yeah,
And then I went to business school.
and then you got your MBA. Yeah. So, and then of course you started your blogging career in the tech environment. So, talk to me a little bit about how this, because it really is sort of an eclectic background. And I kind of found it not, similar to my own, not exactly, but in the sense that I started out as a biologist, drifted into computer science, then went into finance right around, the late 80s, early 90s, got into entrepreneurship. And I've always liked that sort of jack of all trades sort of approach to life. Talk to me about your sort of this eclectic view, because I view it really as it kind of gives you a 360 perspective on just every situation, I would think, right?
It has been really useful. And when people tell me they want to become journalists, I mean, first of all, I just tell them don't. It's our industry is in dire trouble. Do something else.
Right.
But also, I basically I graduated with a degree in English, which was, the joke the year I graduated, which I'm sure many of your listeners will have heard, was what did the English major say to the engineer after graduation? And it's, do you want fries with that? Um, and so I did what young women did with college diplomas in the 90s, was I applied to a lot of jobs where they asked what your typing speed was. And I worked at various assistant jobs, but then I worked at a bunch of startups that immediately would go out of business. I would go to work somewhere, and that was basically the death knell. And so I ended up through a series of kind of accidents getting into network administration, and I worked for a consultancy for 5 years, doing various, mostly for banks and other kinds of financial services firms, doing designing and building and helping to maintain networks, local
Mm,
area networks, client server networks. And then I realized that this was not, I liked it, but I was not the world's best at it, and it was not my passion. And I realized this one day when I was telling my coworkers about my weekend and the concert I'd gone to see and so forth, and they were all just kind of bored. And then when I finally finished, one of them said, "Well, I built a fiber channel network in my basement this weekend." And I was like, I am never going to care about this as much as these guys do. I should go find something else to do. So I went to business school, graduated in 2001. Bad time to go graduate from business school.
right.
My consulting job was like they just terminated me before I ever started. I did get to keep my signing bonus, which was nice. And then I actually worked at Ground Zero for a year
Mm,
in a construction trailer doing admin work, and kind of tried to figure out what I was going to do for the rest of my life. But while I was there, I started a blog, and that turned into some connection and a connection at The Economist. I applied for an entry-level website job there. I got it. This is web editing, not web development.
right.
And that was the what started me on the path to 25 years after I started that blog. This would be my 25th year writing professionally.
Now, when you mentioned 9/11, were you already working down by the towers, or was this
Mm,
post attack?
so no, I worked there a lot before I went to business school. So I worked there a
Okay.
lot in the 90s. We had a lot of clients there.
Mm,
And I also worked in Jersey City for a while, or I worked at the World Financial Center. I worked in a lot. I went through the World Trade Center a lot. I can still, to this day, visualize the mall that was, that you walk through to get to the trains, and
ab-
where the
ab-
chocolate, where the bakery, the Italian bakery was on your way to World Financial Center. Um, and it makes me sad every time I think about it. It was, the view from the
oh,
buildings. I was actually up there. I
mm,
brought my aunt and my cousin. They were visiting New York from Western New York, and my cousin, who was then 11, he wanted to go see the Statue of Liberty.
mm,
And I did not want to go see the Statue of Liberty. If you're from New York, you know why. You have to get on this boat, and then you get there and you have to climb all the way to the top of the Statue of Liberty.
yeah.
I had done it twice and was not up for a third jaunt. So I persuaded him that what he really wanted to do was look at the Statue of Liberty from the observation deck on the World Trade Center. And I'm really glad that I did that because I had actually never been up there before. I'd been to Windows on the World, but I hadn't been to the deck. And of course, it was the last chance Although it's a little eerie because we went there very early in the morning. And I think that if we had gone 2 weeks later, if that trip had happened 2 weeks later, I would have been on the observation deck when the planes hit.
Yeah, that some of those,
I think I calculated.
yeah, some of those circumstances tend to. But I like that you're a true New Yorker. Like most New Yorkers, you start out to go to the Statue of Liberty, then you probably stop at Francis Tavern and you sit there and you say, "Let's have a drink," where George Washington
Yes.
drink, and then
Yep.
you never make it to the Statue of Liberty. Yeah, and the reason I asked is because, ironically, 9/11 was the inflection point for me to stop. So I was a proto podcaster back before it was called podcasting, and
Wow.
after 9/11 because I said I can't do this anymore. I mean, I recorded what I saw around me, and then I was like, I got to stop, because my office at the time was across the street from the towers, adjacent to the firehouse, right there. So it
Oh,
was
wow.
what used to be the old Bankers Trust building. So,
I
uh,
know exactly what building you're talking about.
yeah, so much like yourself, I still remember like the gallery, the arcade, the mini mall in there. The chocolate factory, the Sparrows or whatever it was where you used to get your coffee.
And
Um,
Fort, where you could get smoothies or fruit salad.
yep, yep, yep.
I used to go there all the time. I loved those smoothies.
Yeah, yeah, and my fondest memory, and it's funny, is dodging the Meshack tanks that used to pull up, that used to proselytize the hardcore Judaism, Meshach, the followers of Meshach, and
Yes,
when I had my full beard, I would always get
the
followed.
Lubavitchers. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 exactly, the Lubavitchers, yeah, so it's funny what comes back to your memory. Um, but you mentioned you kind of started blogging, and that's sort of a delineation point. Not exactly at that point, but now, famously, you blogged. Let's call it the Jane Gault era. Okay.
Yes. My blog
Now,
was originally called Live from the WOTC, and I called myself Jane Gault. I was trying to stay anonymous, which didn't work. Too many people knew who I was. And Jane Gault was my email address, and it's not actually, I'm not an objectivist, and I've never been an objectivist. I enjoy reading Atlas Shrugged at the beach like as much as anyone, but I don't think it's a very realistic way to live your life. I'm
mm,
much more of a moderate libertarian. Um, and in 1996, when I first, when it was really early days for the internet, I think it was 96. It might have been 97, but I'm pretty sure it was 96. I would go onto the New York Times forums,
mm.
and there was one guy on there, I can't remember his name, his username, but he would call anyone who disagreed with him and who was to the right of like Chairman Mao, he would call them a randroid. And I was just lurking, but then I wanted to respond to him. And so I had to create a username, and I thought, oh, this will make him mad. And I didn't really think it through. I then got it as my Hotmail address and my Gmail address. And I didn't think that, 30 years later, I would be explaining that I'm not actually an objectivist. But,
Yeah. Well, that was going to be my question: was were you an objectivist at one point? Because
no.
I'm one of those people that when Rand talked about economics, when she talked about personal liberty, I was right there with her. When she talked about it, say with on the old Donahue show, I remember, where I first discovered Milton Friedman was on the Donahue show. Then later on, he had Ayn Rand on, and I said, "Oh, I could deal with her economic views. I could deal about her warnings about Soviet style collectivism." But when she starts talking about her personal philosophy, she kind of lost me. Like what you said, I would find it to be a miserable way to live my life. But
Yeah.
uh, so
So one of the things I really like about her, her villains are better than her heroes.
yeah,
Um, but I also think that a thing that people think that the reason young people resonate with her is just the selfishness. And yeah, sure, young people are selfish. How could you not be, right? You have not yet had much intercourse with the world, and the world around you is oriented towards helping you, not asking things from you. For most young people, I understand that's not true
right,
for everyone, but
right,
that's the general experience. But I actually think that the reason that Ayn Rand really resonates with people of that age is that she is so focused on the heroic, on ways to be heroic in a modern industrial society. And she
mm,
was very influenced by these kind of late 19th, early 20th century pulp novels, not Tarzan, but things in that vein, the adventures of Alan Chamberlain, I think was one of them, but she loved them. And she brings that into her fiction, and you can argue that that makes it pulpy and unrealistic, which is true. Her best
Mm,
novel is her most realistic novel, which is not her, and actually also her first novel. It's a novel called We the Living, um, because the characters are more finely drawn, they're more deeply human. Um, but the thing that I think really resonates with people in The Fountainhead and in Atlas Shrugged is the notion of being called to do something extraordinary, of being called to live up to your highest values.
mm.
And I think there is something really enticing, especially at that age, right? You want dragons to kill. And she suggests that that's possible in a modern industrial economy. You don't need to go read a fantasy novel and go off, and you can be a hero right here. You can exert yourself in a heroic mold. And I think that does really, it still resonates with me. That is to me like one of the most appealing things about her novels is that she believes that. Now, look, you can argue this is not realistic in the same way that I'm also not going to get a sword and go slay a dragon, but I think it is a good aspiration for us to have. And for all of the flaws in her novels, I actually wish more people today wrote in this mold. She was many things, but she was never cynical. And I think that's one reason that people are so attracted to her, 70 years after she wrote.
And there was that what you would call both the golden era and the most reckless era of Wall Street, like in the early '90s. Like if you want to
Hmm.
that Wolf of Wall Street era, if you want to kind of for people who've seen the movie, that was real. That happened, and there were people like that as depicted in that movie. But what I always found about those Wall Streeters when I walked among them was how many of them would cite Rand but not really have read Rand or understood Rand. They just someone told them it was an excuse to be selfish and that it justified their being selfish and to go out and you know take over the world financially. And in some ways you could see that it drove them, and in other ways you could see where it made them reckless towards others, where they didn't care about the consequences of their actions. And if you tried to talk to them about it, they would always justify, well, Ayn Rand says, and then they would try to give you um, some flavor of objectivism. So um, I mean, I understand the heroic strain that you just described, but again, I think it's when people just took it in very quickly without necessarily um, thinking about the entirety of their actions.
Well, and she couldn't, right? I mean, ultimately, her theories fell apart for her.
Yeah.
And so, for people who don't know her biographical details, she had this idea, what the central thing about Atlas Shrugged, it's focused on a heroine, Dagny Taggart, and three men are in love with her, and she chooses the most extraordinary one, and the other two are just fine with it because they think he's awesome too. And that's not how people are. I mean, it's really a nice theory about how maybe people should be. It's not how people are. And um, in her own life, she starts on an affair with a younger objectivist. Well, she and he are both married.
Mm,
And then because, obviously she is the highest female in existence and therefore he should be attracted to her. But he's like, I don't remember, I think like 20 years younger than she is. And eventually he kind of falls in love with, she's in her 50s. I'm in my 50s, sympathetic. I would love to think that we look just as fabulous as we did at 25, but he falls in love with a much younger woman
mm,
and he starts sleeping with her. And eventually he breaks it off with Ayn Rand, and she loses it and never forgives him because it's at odds with her philosophy. But I mean, there are other ways you could read that philosophy. You made a vow to this man, and you are breaking that vow. And I think that even in her own life, it didn't work because it wasn't a good mental model of how human beings are. And that part of it, the lack of empathy, the idea that everything is just a brain in a vat, was never going to work out and caused a lot of heartache for the people who tried to make it work out, just as every, you know, altruistic,
right.
idealistic theory about how humans could be from communism to the free love communes of the 60s, none of them worked because they were not actually grounded. They were grounded in an abstract idea of human nature rather than in the fact of human nature.
Right, right. And I'll use that as a segue to my next section here, which is the upside of down, your book. Now,
Hmm.
in that, obviously you mention it, but even for someone who would just read a synopsis of it, you see a lot of Joseph Schumpeter in there, and that's the whole destructive, creative destruction or destructive creation, whichever way you choose to phrase that. And that's the concept that I happen to agree with, right? That the old always has to make way for the new. The new for society as a whole. So, in and explain this to me, but the way I view it is, in the short run, there's always a little bit of pain as new technologies replace the old ones, as a certain class of jobs are phased out. Very important now as we talk about AI. But overall, society is served, humanity is served by this uh, creation that comes out of destruction. So, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I think one way to think about this problem is to ask yourself, why do we die? Now, this
Mm,
is going to sound a little highfalutin, but you know, single-celled organisms, lower, very simple organisms, don't necessarily have to die. They can be functionally immortal. And I mean, something is eventually going to eat them, right? But they don't have senescence the way we do. And there are a lot of answers to why death happens, but the question I ask myself is, could evolution have selected against it, and why didn't it? And I think that the answer is actually embedded in the question. Why didn't evolution select against it? Because if we didn't die, it would not be possible for us to evolve, or we would not evolve so quickly. Death is, in some sense, some weird sense, adaptive. It's
mm,
really unpleasant. I'm against it.
right,
Just lost both my parents a couple of years ago. I'm not a fan. 0 out of 10.
right.
Would not recommend. Um, but it's also really, if you think about what society would be like if we were all sticking around forever, society would be unable to change. I mean, we're seeing this in societies where we have fewer young people and more old people. They're more conservative, they're more reluctant to take risks. They tend to funnel increasing resources towards the oldest people.
Right.
And which is not to say again, I'm not that kind of libertarian. I'm not saying we should just throw the old people on ice floes and cut off their social
Right.
security checks. I'm just saying that we are, seniors are now like the wealthiest group age cohort in America, and they get a very disproportionate share of government transfers. And something like that is also true in businesses
Right.
and in technologies and in ideas. That if things don't die, even though it is terrible and unpleasant, and look, I have been laid off a bunch of times. I'm in an industry that is in slow motion collapse, sometimes not so slow motion. Um, and it's awful. The human cost is really high, and I see the appeal of saying like this shouldn't happen. But in fact, if that hadn't happened in previous generations, we would all be much poorer. And I don't just mean much poorer in that we wouldn't have as nice furniture. I mean much poorer in senses that really matter for human welfare.
Right.
That we would not have. So just today on the internet, I was reading that scientists have just tried, it's an engineered virus. It's one injection. They inject it into the cochlea of congenitally deaf people, and it changes a gene that in these people, the gene can't produce a chemical that's critical for being able to hear. And within 4 months, people are able to hear. They're able to
Amazing.
have conversations. It's
Yeah.
amazing. If you think of my father, no man in my father's family ever lived past the age of 50 because we have congenital familial hypertension. I've been on blood pressure drugs since I was in my 30s. My father lived to be 82
Mm,
because of these amazing advances. You look at something like the self-driving cars. I understand people's fears around them in various ways, but the safety record, it looks like it's 92% fewer accidents, serious accidents. Um, and if you translate that into deaths, 40,000 people a year die on American roads. And so there are all of these really, really serious ways in which higher education, mass higher education, in Victorian America, that was not possible. There were not enough resources. Most people had to spend most of their time growing food.
Right.
And when the only way we can get everyone going through high school and college is to be so rich that we have enough surplus to take people out of the workforce for 4 years. Retirement.
Hmm.
We have enough surplus to take people out of the workforce for 20 years when they're tired and their bodies are giving out.
Right.
All of those things are amazing improvements in human life. And the thing that was necessary for that to happen is for things to change, is for old ways to not work anymore. And the people, there's often a cost for the people who were invested in the old ways, and you shouldn't downplay that.
Yeah.
We should look for ways to mitigate it, but we should also understand that mitigation cannot be cessation.
Yeah, and that sounds like a very reasonable approach. It's one I share when I was, going over some of your work, and it's you find isolated instances where this makes sense, even in your personal life. Like when I was in school, I remember one of my professors saying, "Look, there used to be this industry in the U.S. in the '50s when bowling was at its peak. You could be a pin boy, you could be a pin girl, and you would go set the pins manually, and then somebody invented the machine that did it. Well, it made bowling a better experience for everyone, but for the individual pin boys and pin girls, sorry, gone. Toll booth takers. If it weren't for the toll booth takers union,
Yeah.
everything would be automated, right? And we have less traffic. Things would flow faster. So when you look at it at a very micro scale, I think it makes sense to most people. I think it's when you look at something like AI, and I keep saying this, right? Whenever we have the latest industrial innovation, doom and gloom. People are going to be put out of work. People are going to starve. Industries are disappearing. You mentioned your industry, the newspapers, the radio, the TV has now been taken over by streamers. We're doing this podcast without gatekeepers. Um, just as a little side note here, do you feel AI is a net positive or a net negative as we progress? Is it part of creative destruction or is it a side folly for the few entrenched wealthy?
I am gonna bracket one problem that I don't know and it's a serious problem that I don't know how to assess, which is what are the odds that this thing kills us? Or that it enables someone to say build a 100% fatal virus in their garage and because they're angry at the world to release it, right?
You're talking about the
I don't
Terminator area, right? Like a
there's like the Terminator, but there's also what if this thing enables, instead of a mass shooter, someone creates a mass contagion
gotcha.
that's highly fatal and kills, 90% of the world's population, something like that. Um, I don't know how to assess those risks. And so to the extent they're real, that's going to be net negative. And if I could assign a probability to those things, I would have a better ability to give the overall, is this going to be positive or is this going to be negative? But bracketing that, I think it's positive. Now, I don't think it's going to be positive for everyone. And one of the things that I got into a bit of trouble last week because I tweeted about how I use AI, and there are a lot of writers who just think you should never touch it. Um, I think this is naive in a way because their idea is like that this process should never be touched by a machine making decisions. But of course, like Google search is an algorithm that shapes what you know and what information you have. There are bits of AI in it, even if you cover up the AI summary that now comes up at the top. There's no way we're deciding where to draw the line, not whether to use technology to shape how we think. We've already made that decision. Most people. I know that Robert Caro is still out there writing this biography of Lyndon Johnson on yellow pads, but the rest of us have already decided we are going to interface with machines. Um, but one of, I don't let it never touches my copy. I had one passage of AI that I copy and pasted, but I copy and pasted it because I was offering an example of what AI could do. It was in a December 2022 column. It was uh, italicized. It was clearly marked as AI. That was what the column was about. I told people immediately, right? Um, but I don't let it write my copy. I would never copy and paste a paragraph. I don't rely on its summaries. What I ask it to do is give me links, and then I go read the links. I never, never, never trust it. any more than I would trust a research assistant. I'm sure my research assistant is a very smart, nice person, but I have to read it or I don't know it.
Hmm.
Um, or I don't understand it, right? Like it's really good for, say, one example, I was writing something about the Columbia University uh, BDS, a campaign for divestment from Israel at Columbia, and I was trying to actually just figure out what percentage of the endowment was in equities. Well, so I do a control F to search for equities. It turns out that there were a lot of mentions of equity, almost all of which referred to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
And so there I am staring glumly at like the 200 mentions of equity and realizing I'm going to have to page through all of them. And then I thought, what if I just pop this into Claude and see if Claude can find it? And so I just put the document into Claude and I said, where in this document can I find the percentage of the endowment that's invested in equity? Give me the section and pull a sentence out. So it pulled a sentence out. It gave me the section. And so then I just searched the sentence, which got me exactly to where I wanted to go. I didn't need to read the whole trustee report.
right,
And the people who are saying like, you should read everything, like I don't need to read about, I'm looking for one piece of information. I do not need to read about how the Columbia trustees are thinking about like their science funding or anything else. I needed to know one thing for this column. It's really good at stuff like that. But so I think in that way, it's great. I talked to a lot of journalists and it has just made their research way more productive. There are arguments about how much you can use it to clean up your copy. My policy is that I usually use it when I'm over word length, which is always. Um, and I will say, like, where could this be shortened? I need to get this down by 400 words or whatever. But then again, it doesn't touch my copy. It makes suggestions. I look at where it's flagged. I don't really take the cuts it has suggested, but
right.
usually it's flagged the sentences that could be the paragraphs that could be a
Yeah,
sentence. And so then I rewrite it. Um, and how much I use it to do a preliminary fact check. We have excellent human fact checkers. I'm grateful for them every day. But I like to, I save myself embarrassment and save them some time by having it. I do my own fact check too. I go through,
right.
I re-verify, but just having that extra layer, in my book, if you've read it, I talk about the Swiss cheese model of failure. It's one of my favorite ideas about failure. He says basically, imagine a bunch of slices of Swiss cheese. And these are security systems. What you do is you take a bunch of slices of Swiss cheese and you lay them one on top of the other. And even though each of those slices has holes in it, as long as the holes don't line up, you can't have a failure. And so what I think of this is as I am adding another layer of Swiss cheese, right? And I think of that on the research side too. You can do much better searches with AI than you can do with Google, partly because Google search has gotten a little bit worse, but also partly because so for example, Kelsey Piper, who writes for The Argument, had said something and I was looking for it. I couldn't find it. She tweeted it. And so I went to Grok, which is the X AI. It's
Yeah,
integrated into X. And I just said, has at Kelsey Tuak said this thing? Can you find it? Can you find me the tweet? And it searches and it realizes that I had thought she'd been talking about Claude Code and she was talking about Codex, which is why it wasn't turning up. I had slightly misremembered it. It's really good at that sort of thing. Google will not do that for you. You can give it just broader search terms. I would like research papers, press releases, X, Y, and Z. You can tell Claude to go as I just did. This is one of my favorite new uses. I
right,
realized stupidly, I should have known this because it's been available for a while, but I was hand downloading all of these documents from DC's kind of janky website where, because it's pretty old, the DC government to get the budget reports, you click through, I want the full report. And then there's another page that contains nothing but a link to the report. And
right.
so, it's just like slow. And I was like, Claude, can you go get all of these for me? And it said, yes, I can. And it went and fetched them. It was amazing. I mean, it saved me an enormous amount of time. And I guess you could argue that clicking through janky websites is part of the true process of journalism, but I don't think most people really think this is an essential part of doing the work.
Yeah.
But the issue is there are real issues. The people who were mad at me, I sort of disagree with them about some fundamental things. But if I steel man their case, right? Um, one problem is that some of this work has been done by other people, and while I never had a research assistant. I'm probably never going to. So I'm not replacing a research assistant. We haven't replaced our fact checkers. They're irreplaceable. We love our fact checkers at Washington Post Opinions. We're certainly not replacing my human editor. Um, but part of the question is like fact checking jobs and research assistant jobs. Those are places where junior journalists get a foothold, and it's really nice that this makes me more productive. But does that mean that there are fewer junior jobs where people can get to the point where I am, where I've been doing this for a long time, which gives me the second problem, right? I've been doing this for a long time. I have my coverage areas that I've been working on now for 10, 20 years in many cases. Not AI, obviously. That's about a 4-year coverage period. But I know enough about it that when Claude gives me a bad result, when GBT gives me a bad result, I often don't even need to look at the source, right? I can spot it. No, oh, that's a
Right.
common misconception. I'm not even going to look at that source. It's not going to be useful. So, and how do you acquire those skills? Those are hard problems.
Yeah.
And then there's the fact that the temptation to go too far. I have what I think are some pretty strong guardrails. Never touch the copy. Don't, I don't use it for inspiration. I have been experimenting with trying to get it to find stories that are kind of interesting and out of the way that I might not have come across. That's still a work in progress. But even so, I mean, one of the things I'm having to train it out of is like, you could write this column. No, I don't want you to tell me what column I could write with this, right? What I want you to tell me is, here is something that happened in Bloomington, Indiana that you would never have seen if you hadn't set up this running search,
Right.
right?
Right. Yeah.
And that's still a work in progress. I haven't gotten very far with that, but so I think I hope, my hope is that I can use that kind of search to do stories I wouldn't have done, to find stuff that happened I wouldn't have known about, and therefore to give my readers wider access to more great stuff. But the temptation, if you're using it, and we have seen this with like Alex Preston, who's a British novelist who was doing a book review for the New York Times, he was short on his word count, which, first of all, professional writers, we're all boggled. What do you mean you didn't have enough words? My problem is always like, how do I make this 1,500 word thing I've written be the 800 word column that my editor wants?
Right.
But he used it to pad out. He was already doing a kind of do this in New York Times House style, um, which I wouldn't do that. But I'm lucky I'm an American. I wrote for The Economist for 5 years, and it was like when I was blogging at the same time, and my blog is all in British English because it was too hard for me to keep them both
Right.
in my head at the same time. I was getting enough mean notes from our style editor. We had a guy who oversaw the style book, and whenever he caught like an Americanism or something he would send
Right.
you a mean note. But while he's doing that, he says, well, can you beef it out? And it goes and plagiarizes a review from The Guardian. And that shouldn't happen. It shouldn't happen on a number of levels. I mean, first of all, if your readers wanted to know what GPT's opinion of the book was, they could go read it.
Right.
So they could go ask GPT. So you shouldn't do that because it's a violation of trust.
Well,
Um,
I was gonna, let me interrupt for a second. I think I was
yeah,
gonna ask you that because I think in your particular case, what you've laid out is clearly someone who has an ethical construct around her own profession and her own work, and you've thought about it and you've drawn your bright lines. Now compare it to someone like me, where I use AI freely as a research assistant. It doesn't replace anyone's job because there wasn't that position
yes.
here, right? So now I'm careful much like yourself, not to simply cut and paste, right? Because in my limited areas of experience and expertise, I'm able to immediately say, no, this is wrong. They're going down the AI is going down the wrong path, and I've slowly started to build up these trusted pathways for myself. So, whereas I'm fully comfortable using AI as a research assistant and to help me craft what's in my head in order to have greater throughput. Um, you clearly have taken a more stringent uh, use case for AI. Do you feel, though, as I do in certain areas, that your approach is leaning more into the expertise, the expert mode, right? And then I'm going to bring this around to some of your other theses around expertise, right? Like much like yourself, I'm not the libertarian. I'm not an anarchist. I don't believe in burning everything to the ground. I do have faith in experts, but as a young man, when I was studying getting my degree in biology, I came across the double helix by James Watson. For those that don't know, he was one half of the famous Watson and Crick duo who discovered the structure of the double helix for DNA. And it opened my eyes as a young man because it totally shattered my understanding of how scientists operated. I mean, here's a guy who was talking about sneaking into labs, stealing other people's notes, dating Crick's sister so he could get into Crick's lab because he had blown up enough labs and nobody else would take. Like it was a fascinating insight into what at the time all of us thought scientists were. These guys in white lab coats who were so focused that they never dated. They were all the nerds, things like that. But it never diminished my belief that in people who put in their 10,000 hours, who had spent their time learning their to become the top of their field, their expertise. I to this day I still have trust in those people. Maybe I shouldn't, but I still have trust in those people. What I don't allow them to do is to use their trust to form my opinions for me. But in some ways, you're saying like, if I understand some of your thesis, is like, where is that line that we can't cross with our trust in experts? Or are you saying experts are really the cause of a lot of our trouble from the mistrust that we now have in our society?
I think I have a lot of thoughts on this at once, and you just have to be comfortable with the complexity. And one thought is that expertise is the reason that I am not living in a hut. And that is good. And experts are good. And experts know more than people about a lot of stuff. And I think about this in areas I cover, right? The budget, you talked about this at the top of the show. Most people think that there's an easy solution out there. And the one thing that everyone in Washington knows that is that if it was easy, it would already have been done.
Right.
The only ways to cut the budget are to cut someone's income that they're counting on. You can, there's some room on taxes, but some of it's going to have to be on the spending side, and that's going to hurt for whoever suffers those cuts. It's going to really hurt.
Right.
And that's, we can argue about who should get those cuts, right? But there is no like, oh, we'll just tax billionaires and they just have all this money, they won't even miss it. That's not how it's going to work. There's not enough, the billionaires do not have nearly enough money for that. But you cannot convince people of this. They're just convinced that there's an easy way because they're not going to spend like 5 years getting, and you know what? I could not tell you what's happening in my car. I will never find out. My
Yeah.
husband's an audiophile. Do we have like crazy huge speakers in our basement? Do I know what's happening? No idea. Don't know how they work. I could probably find out to some level of expertise. Don't really care. I have
Right.
better things to do with my life. I'm going to trust the speaker guys to do
Right.
their thing, right? And you just have to. You have to outsource your opinion on most stuff. You cannot be an expert in everything, right? Um, and so you do have to believe in experts. And a lot of the rebellion against things like vaccines,
Hmm.
of people who are like, I do my own research. Like I've read some of the stuff that they're relying on, and it's just specious.
Yes.
But I also understand why if you're not immersed in this, it's hard to spot where people are hiding the football and where they're being disingenuous, or being crazy. And I also understand why those people do not trust the public health community because the public health community did not behave in a trustworthy way during the pandemic. Now, I will say, I think that there
Right.
are a lot of areas where people fault them. So, for example, I think anything that happened before August 2020, you just got to give people a mulligan. We had a new virus, no one knew how it worked. It was all very confusing, and people were reacting under uncertainty. Like in any situation where there's uncertainty, you're going to make bad decisions. You're going to make decisions that in hindsight look stupid. So,
Right.
good example of this. My father got COVID in April of 2020. He was in a he had congestive heart failure. He was in a cardiac rehab facility, and it was like a horror movie
Mm.
where he goes in on March 1st. And I called the facility because I had already been tracking COVID, and I said, "So my sister and I just want to reassure you, we're in like the meeting that they do when a patient comes in, and you have a meeting with a family to talk about what the timeline is and so forth." And I said, "I just want you to know, my sister and I are going to isolate just in case so that we won't make him sick." And it was like I had said I
Mm.
was stockpiling crystals
Yeah.
so that I
Yeah.
could do, a shamanic healing ceremony when he came home. They were like, "Oh, well, that's nice, crazy person." And then, of course, 15 days later, everything goes into lockdown. And then I asked them about their testing regimen. They didn't have one. And then they finally came back and were like, "We have one case." And then they had three cases. And finally, I just called my dad and I was like, "Dad," and my father, by the way, is not getting any of the therapy he's supposed to get there. He's locked in a room.
Okay.
So I finally called my father and I said, "Dad, we're driving up to Massachusetts and we're just going to come get you and take you back to your house. Obviously, that's worse than having you in rehab, but you're not getting rehab, so we're just coming." So my
Right.
sister and I get in the car. We start going to Massachusetts. We're driving. It was really, I guess I shouldn't admit this, we're driving like 95. There's no cars on the road.
Yeah.
We get the fastest I have ever driven to Massachusetts because nothing, totally
Right.
wide open highways. We're the only car on the highway in a lot of spots.
Yeah.
For like 45 minutes, we would not see another car. And we get there and literally we're like an hour from Massachusetts and they call to tell us that my dad is tested positive. And so we're there for 2 weeks and then he comes home and he's still testing positive. They discharged him. We didn't have any choice about it.
Right.
It's kind of understandable, but now we were really lucky. My father never even ran a fever. It was a very mild case of COVID. Um, but we didn't know what to do with someone who was testing positive. So I'm really lucky. I'm a columnist for the Washington Post. I write about healthcare. I called Aaron Carroll, who at that point was writing a column for the New York Times on healthcare. He got me an all-star team. I had the former dean of Harvard's medical school. I had a dean, a guy who just stepped down as the dean of Brown's public health school. Right, they're all on a conference call with me and we're gaming this out. And what they gamed out for me was you have to have and we tried to isolate him and it would prove to be impossible because his house is open concept.
Right.
And so the first floor, and he didn't have much mobility. So the first floor where he is just totally open.
Right.
So a reader who saw that I was in this situation on Twitter FedExed me three N95 masks that he had left over from doing home renovations.
Wow.
We were totally isolated. We had a whole protocol for like every time we left our rooms, we had to cover everything, glasses, mask, hair covered. The windows are open. It is 35 degrees in Massachusetts at this point.
Right.
I had to have a space heater in my hands while I was working so that
Wow.
I could type because otherwise they would be too stiff. And none of this we now know was necessary, right?
Right.
He was not contagious. He was past the 2 week window where people are contagious, but we had no idea.
Well,
Now, if I could go back and tell myself not to do all of that, I would tell myself not to do all of that. But and also not to be really afraid, right? I have hypertension. We didn't know how fatal it was. I was really frightened of getting sick. Um, but we didn't know. And so that's what we did. Now, that stuff, all of that stuff, you just got to give people mulligans. There was no information, and expecting them to act with your perfect hindsight is stupid. But reopening schools, we had evidence from Europe, which had reopened schools, and we
right.
didn't do it. Right? There was, I mean, everyone, probably most of your listeners know the litany, right? Where you can't be in public gatherings, you can't go to church, you can't go to funerals. But if you're protesting George Floyd's death, that's fine.
Yeah,
The vaccine rollout plan, where the committee that's supposed to recommend this chooses the plan that literally their own research tells them will kill the most people in the name of equity. On and on and on. That stuff, they were not worthy of. They were behaving in untrustworthy ways. Yes, and if you do that, then I understand the internal, like, I was in mainstream media during the Great Awakening.
mm,
I understand why people were afraid to speak up when their colleagues were out there saying things that were really destructive to public trust. I understand the personal incentives of like, does it really matter that much if I just say this because it's really nice and racism's really bad? Yes,
right,
it matters a lot. I understand why they did it, but they abdicated the trust that had been placed in them and they alienated a lot of people. But that said, that still doesn't make it sensible to not vaccinate your kids,
right,
right? We have record measles cases, the highest they've been in decades. Kids are dying of
right.
measles because people are afraid. And that's a really hard thing. You have to be able to hold those two ideas in tension. The scientists are not perfect. They have normal human motivations. They do things for reasons that are not pure scientific disinterest, but have a lot to do with their own internal prestige networks and back slapping and all of that. The science is never perfect. It's the process and not the person. The all of those signs, like in this house, we believe in science. What does that even mean? Yes, I believe in science too. I've seen it. It exists.
Yeah,
That doesn't tell you that you should believe in any particular result, right? Like that both attitudes are wrong. That these people are sometimes untrustworthy and therefore I should just ignore everything they say is one way of being wrong. And another way is scientists are the good people and the people who distrust them are the bad people. And therefore I trust the scientists blindly. Both very wrong ways of thinking about the world. And you just got to navigate an uncertain and imperfect world the best you can.
yeah, and Megan, that's always been my position. It's which I consider, although I consider myself a libertarian, I consider that the centrist approach to life. Which is, I mean, one thing that I always said as the pandemic hit was the worst people to communicate what's going on are the experts in the field of virology and bacterial. My wife's a microbiologist. I kind of had someone who could explain things to me a little bit more detail, and of course, her network of virologists and people like that. But I think having had one foot in that world for a while, the worst people you could have are egghead scientists trying to explain how things work. There's a reason why they're experts. They don't spend their time doing press conferences and writing paper for the Washington Post or for the New York Times. They wrote, if anything, they published scholarly papers that all of us would be put to sleep by in 10 seconds. Um, so that was a mistake. There was no project manager for them. There was no interpreter for them, I think, that came out and said, okay, this is what uh, the consensus is. These are the experts, blah, blah, blah. The lying, obviously, huge mistake for trust. Having said that, though, do you think there's any way back to that, or are we as a society now just doomed because the pendulum has swung, not doomed, but the pendulum has swung to the opposite arc now, where the majority of people have no trust in anything, which could be calamitous, right? Because there's going to be another pandemic. This is just a certainty, right? Whether it happens in a year or 10 years, it's going to happen again. If the pendulum is still stuck up here in the we don't trust anything, like, an RFK devotee, right? Um, is that setting us up for an even bigger disaster in your opinion? Or is there any way to kind of get the bob of the pendulum right smack in the center like we just talked about?
Yeah, I think that a good way to start, and something I try to do in my own columns, I don't always get there, because you're really right that first of all, there is a problem that the experts, it's hard for them to get to the level of communicating with people who don't know everything, because it's hard to remember what you don't know. A
Right.
couple weeks ago, I am not an economist, I have an MBA, but I wrote a column on wealth taxes in which I was trying to illustrate the principle that financial paper wealth you can't tax that. What you have to do is what you're actually worried about is the real supply of goods and services in the economy. And the fact that someone on paper is worth 200 billion does not mean that you could get 200 billion dollars worth of goods and services. Now, this
Right.
is like this is a it's not people can grasp this, but I just kind of said it really quickly, and my editor was totally confused.
Mm,
And we went back and forth for like 45 minutes where he was like, I don't understand it. I was like, I just don't understand why you don't understand. This is so easy. And then finally, I kind of got off the phone and then I just thought about it for a while. And I was like, okay, well, let's think about an island that has really tight zoning and it's got this number of houses and you can't build any more houses. And and then the town fathers noticed that there's like a lot of homeless people living in caves because they can't afford the rent, and they think, I know what we'll do. Look at how high the property values are. We're going to enact a 10% property tax. We're going to take that money and use it to give people rental vouchers, right? And you can immediately see the problem with this. You haven't increased the number of houses. There's no, right? You can change who's in the houses, but the supply is fixed, right?
right.
And so, and like he was like, "Oh, okay. Now I get it." Right?
Right.
And so getting down to the level off of the expert stuff is hard for people, but the other thing is that there's uncertainty.
Mm,
And so first of all, people who are experts, they're really deep, they're deeply immersed in, they're often on one side of controversies within their field that you and I have never even heard of.
yes.
We've spent a lot of time having those arguments. They're pretty deep into them, often their professional reputations tied to it. But then you add in something like a pandemic where they really want people to do the safe thing.
Right.
And so what do they want to do? They want to project confidence and they want to tell people this is the right thing to do. And the more confidence they project and the more, to be honest, the more people were trying to use their authority for stuff that wasn't really about their professional judgment,
Mm,
right? Whether racism is more important than going to your grandfather's funeral, that's
right.
not a scientific judgment. That is
Correct.
a value judgment.
Correct.
Um, and that is like to treat that as a question of professionalism. So what I think, first of all, is that you have to really separate those things out. Your job is not to use your discipline to get to try to change the world. It is to use your discipline to try to tell people the world will change if you can identify how it works. That will help people decide how they want to change the world. But your job is not to make the value judgments for your audience. That's number one. But the other thing, you've got to be a lot more willing to express uncertainty, even if,
Right.
and I think what people are afraid, you've seen this with climate science, you've seen this with a lot of things. Even if you are afraid that people will exploit that uncertainty to not take enough action,
Right.
right? That's, you've got to express the uncertainty. You cannot try to make the science sound more concrete than and solid than it is in the hopes that that will motivate people to do things, because it will motivate some people to do things. It will also motivate other people to ignore you. And you just have to be there like, hey guys, we're all out here trying to figure this out. Really hard problems. This is where we are right now. And this is what we're asking you to do. I'm going to warn you right now. I'm probably going to be wrong about some of this. And I'm really sorry. This is new. And that's not what they did, or they
Right.
not what they did enough. And that, I think we have to get back to that, is like our job is not to tell you what to do, it is to tell you what we know and
Right.
how well we know it.
I agree with you, but and I'm being purposely a little combative with you here because I want to tease
Sure.
out some things here. But for example, you know the old adage: it takes an hour to disavow an idiot of a misgiving than it is to convince him of a truth. Right? It's just for those of us that try to go through it, especially if you're an expert in a field, like I'm sure, like if I was to come and say, Megan, just use AI, copy and paste it, change it around a little bit, nobody will know the difference. What's the big deal? But you don't understand, John. I'll be, but what about this? What about this? And eventually, you're just going to go, for crying out loud, just stop. You know, you don't understand. You haven't been through it, right? That is an all too human frustration. I've gone through it in whatever area of expertise I happen to be talking about. I'm sure you have with people who are not journalists or weren't economists or whatever. How do you find that tension, though? It is a tension. Trying to be honest, trying to be forthcoming, but at the same time, the most confident people on this planet sometimes are idiots. Let's be blunt. I won't identify anybody by name, but there's idiots who are super confident. They project their confidence very well, and in doing so, they're the Pied Piper, leading people to objectively worse situations and harmful situations. So how do you adjudicate that in your head when you're looking at this? Because I agree with you. In general, I agree with you. I think you just got to put the facts out there, be sincere with people, and say, I've done this for 30 years. Here's my best opinion, but I might be wrong. I think that's the honest way to go. But a lot of times, the guy who says, "Hey, I did my research on the internet. I have the best AI. Here's what you should do: put a tinfoil on your head and hope for the best." That may resonate with more people, right? And how do you deal with that?
Um, I think the question you're asking is ultimately we're all like, let's say we're in the game to get what get at the truth and to spread it as widely as possible and to get a better society full of people who are doing good things consonant with what we know the truth to be, or what we're pretty sure the truth is, right? And in that game, players who come in and pretend to confidence they're not entitled to, especially if it tells people that they don't have to do something hard,
Right.
right? You tell someone global warming's not happening, that's a lot easier than finding out that global warming's happening. We got to do something about it, right? Um, and so you look at people who come in, they're just like, ha, that's a lie. Ha, you just need to take ivermectin and it does better than these fancy, scary vaccines that people are pumping out. Um, yeah, the temptation in that is to mimic their confidence. I think it's a bad strategy. I think it's a bad strategy just because I believe one should be truthful as just a kind of first
Right.
principles. You should, um, but I also think that over time there are a lot of reasons not to do that. And also, look, I got tired. I was more pro lockdown than I would be now.
Mm.
Right? Again, there's a lot of stuff I didn't know. If I could go back and tell myself then what I don't know now, I would. Or what I do know now, rather, what I didn't know then. But I also spent a lot of time going back and forth with people, and I got tired of it, and it would make me angry sometimes because my mom had COPD. I was very afraid for her. We were potted with her, and so it also felt a little bit like these people were threatening my mother. I understand that that's not how they saw it, and I'm not
Right.
casting aspersions. I'm telling you my emotional state
Sure.
about. I was very, very anxious about my mother. Um, Less so about my father simply because he'd already had it and presumably had some immunity. Um, but I still argued with them. And this is true on a whole bunch of things. So like, when I ended up writing a column about this AI controversy that I touched off, what I actually tried to do was say, like, here is what I think the best version of those people's arguments are, right? And partly that's because, like, a lot of my readers are going to share those arguments. And so just being like, ha, I'm right. Partly it is because I am uncertain. I'm not sure where the lines are ultimately going to fall. I have pretty strong opinions that are partly based on the fact that, like, I'm a native English speaker. I've been writing since I was 8. I love writing. I don't want to use AI to do my writing. It would be like I want to use AI to eat my ice cream. What? Like, no, no, no. That's why I do this job, because I love it.
Or as my mother
Um,
used to say, I never use a batter mix. I always make my cakes from scratch because
yeah.
you can't put in a box what someone who's been baking for her whole life can learn. And which sounds alien to today's homemakers, right? And to today's uh, uh, people who bake, right?
Well, I gotta say, I also don't use cake mixes. I hate them, and it's not. I use shortcuts. There are shortcuts that I will definitely use. My
Right.
mother, it broke her heart that I started making my mashed potatoes from the frozen ones that you
Oh,
steam in the bag, but that actually makes a pretty good mashed potato.
okay.
So, but I don't like cake mixes. They don't taste as good as the thing, and also I like making cakes. I like the process of it, right?
Right. Right.
Um, but am I going to tell someone who's not a native English speaker and not writing for a journalistic outlet that they shouldn't use AI? Like, look, if the choice is if the like, for an instruction manual, right? My object is not to, like, make a beautiful connection with another human mind. I do not wish to understand the factory owner's beautiful struggle with the English language. I
Right.
just want to know how to assemble my furniture. And
Right.
so if you can get a better set of instructions from a chatbot, please do that, right? I mean, there's all sorts of, I'm not just valorizing the idea of writing for in every context. I'm valorizing the kind of writing I do, which is about human beings learning together. And I really think that learning happens when you're struggling with something. And
Right.
that's the thing, is that I want to show readers my own struggle, because I think in the short term, sure, a bunch of people are going to dismiss me. The number of times I see my columns retweeted with like, even Megan McArdle admits, blah, blah, blah. Right. But I think over the longer run, that buys me credibility.
Yes.
And it also, the most important thing it does though, is it buys me the option to change my mind. And a thing that I have tried to communicate to young writers, I've made all the mistakes because I started off blogging, no filter, no editor. And I said a bunch of stuff I shouldn't have said early on because I didn't really think about what it meant to be writing in public. I'm still living with many of those decisions. 20, I am still explaining some of the dumb stuff I wrote that I should not have written that was wrong in the early days. I'm a lot less combative than I used to be. And one of the reasons I'm so much less combative is that the thing I realized is that if you the thing I say to young writers is never go full frontal jerk on the internet.
Mhm.
Not just because it's not a great way to try to build a better society, but because if you have been obnoxious and it turns out you're incorrect,
Oh, yeah.
it is so hard to climb down. It's humiliating. And so because you know it's going to be humiliating when you're like, oh yeah, I wrote this 1,000 word snarky piece on how this person's a total moron, and guess who turned out to be the moron? Um, And so, like, if I've just said, like, I don't think this is right, like, this is what I'm thinking, then you can be like, oh, well, I have gotten a new piece of information and that was incorrect. Sorry, guys, this person is right. That's an easy thing to say.
Right.
If you said this, like, troglodyte, so stupid, what a moron, can't believe anyone this immoral and awful is allowed to exist in the United States of America in this year of our Lord 2026, you're in a bad position. And so one of the things that I think is really dangerous is the way everything's so polarized, right? Nothing can just be like, well, this is a hard problem. Here's how I'm thinking about it. It all has to be like, I'm one of the good people, good, smart people. And then on the other side are the bad, stupid people. And everything they think because they're bad, stupid people is stupid and bad. And everything I think is good and smart because I'm one of the good, smart people. And so I think one of the great benefits of writing with humility and communicating that humility to other people is that you have so much more freedom to try to get closer to the truth, to try to, both people will trust you more. No one
Yeah.
likes being screamed at. Like there's a great little grandma epigram that I'm very fond of. One convinced against his will is of the same opinion still.
Right.
No one ever changes their mind because you have called them an idiot.
Right.
They
Right.
might
Yeah.
pretend. The people who were pretending to believe all sorts of things during the height of cancel culture, a lot of them pretended, but you hadn't changed anyone's mind. You had just made them pretend. And then when they stopped pretending, the people who'd been doing the bullying were very surprised and hurt. But that's what you get by bullying someone. The only
Yeah.
way, the only way to ultimately get where you want to go is humility and generosity and just trying, just understanding we're all doing the best we can in this vale of tears. And that's, you can't do better than that. You've got to be willing to fail in public, which means that you have got to prepare yourself a soft landing, which is not
Right.
getting too invested in any idea and not being and not ever saying anything that will be hard to take back.
Yeah. And you know what? I agree with that. And I think that's a big issue, especially in the echo chambers on social media, because the horrific morons that do hit you hard and are obnoxious, when the pendulum swings back against them, they just pretend it never happened and they just move on to the next. And the people who amplify that, really, that's a vicious cycle that unfortunately I think is going to, that's not, you're trapped in the gravity of a star. You have to really work to get out of it. But I like your approach and I like your outlook. I think that's a great note to end the interview on. Megan McArdle, thank you so much. But before we sign off, I always do a segment called the Final Five. These are 5 questions, not all that serious, but hopefully they'll give us a little more insight into your personality and character. Okay.
All right.
Question number one. If you had to choose one person to explain a recession to at a dinner party, would you rather it be a 5-year-old, a billionaire, or a member of Congress?
member of Congress because I think it would make the most difference. The 5-year-old would struggle,
Right.
right? I mean, the a 5-year-old's mind it's learning so much and so much complicated stuff. You think about how just hard it is to walk, right? They've got bigger things to worry about right now. The billionaire probably has a pretty decent grasp of the business cycle, but the congressman might not. It sort of depends on what their background is, and also what they're under. Like them having a deeper understanding of the business cycle is probably going to make the most difference to policy.
If they were willing to admit that they didn't
Well,
understand.
sure. You know what? I'm just going to plant the seed. We're going to let it just put it in the soil. Hopefully, in a few years, it'll germinate
Well,
and bloom.
that's actually what I used to do. I should have said maybe a 12-year-old might have been a more compelling choice for you, but
Fair.
I always used to do that with my niece when she was still in high school and grade school. Was I'd always sit her by and try to teach her Austrian economics or Chicago school economics through practical examples. Because I'm hoping maybe one day she could grow up to be an Austrian economist and set the world straight. Okay, what's more dangerous in America? Bad incentives, bad information, or the people who say circle back but with total confidence?
Bad incentives, because bad incentives create bad information and bad behavior and bad responses, right? If you have good incentives and people have bad information, they'll go find better information.
Mm,
But if they have good information and bad incentives, the outcomes are just going to stay bad.
right, they could still weaponize the good
Yep.
information. Yep, yep,
But I mean, it's not even a guy I knew who was an entrepreneur used to talk about how people incentivize their sales force. And if anyone has ever managed a sales force, I haven't, but I've watched this process, right?
mm,
You know that companies are constantly trying to divine a set of incentives that will exactly align the salespeople's interests with the companies, and the
right,
salespeople are just endlessly finding ways to comply with the letter of the thing, but in
right,
ways that don't necessarily help the company. So, for example, I worked at a company where we bought a lot of equipment. And so our equipment guy, who was in charge of doing all the ordering, at the end of the year, he would always order a ton of equipment. Why? Because there were a bunch of salespeople who wanted to hit their quotas, and then they would just ship it back on like January 3rd.
right,
Right. And the entrepreneur I was talking to, he said, yeah, the problem is like you look at your sales force and you're like, these guys, they're not that intellectual. They're just like really charming. They're good at connecting with their customers, et cetera. And then so you change the sales system and you're like you're going to get them to do what I'm really smart. I'm going to set up the set of incentives and I'm going to make these people do what I want. And he's like, they're like Aristotle.
yes,
They will suddenly like figure out every hole,
right,
if you try to, they'll immediately turn into like high level math geniuses who can explain to you exactly why this system is no good and not fair.
right.
And that's just it. So it's not even, but I would do the same thing in their place. I wouldn't be any different. It's not because like they're bad people. This is just what the incentives are.
I agree with you. It's also one of the reasons why I enjoy listening to Tim Dillon's stories of when he was a mortgage lender. It's like some of those stories are hilarious.
And
I've
terrifying. Yes.
terrifying, and yeah, but so I get what you're saying. Okay, you're trapped on a long plane flight between a crypto maximalist and a central planner. Who breaks your spirit first?
Um, Probably the central planner. The crypto people, I just don't. I have been trying to get people to explain to me what crypto is good for 15 years now.
Mm,
I'm not much closer to believing in crypto, but I find it endlessly fascinating to try.
right.
Whereas the central planning people, they just make me sad.
Mm. Sad is not a good place to be on a long flight. I'll
Yeah,
tell you that much. Okay.
indeed.
Okay.
I hope we have complimentary whiskey on this flight.
I'm sure you would. Okay. This one's gonna ask for a little imagination. Jane Gault walks into a WAPO editorial
Someone
meeting.
is at front doorbell. Oh, sorry. Just a sec. You want to repeat the question?
Sure, I'll start over. Jane Gault walks into a WAPO editorial meeting. Does she high five you or does she demand a full repeal of Obamacare on the spot?
Um, I think Jane Gault might be a little disappointed in me. I've softened over the years,
Mm,
but I think and I don't think that I believe it's even possible to repeal Obamacare at this point. It's so deeply embedded in the system in so many ways. So I think she would demand it, and I would try to explain to her why it's not going to happen.
okay. All right. And the last question, finish this sentence. The greatest unintended consequence in policy history is.
Oh man, that's a hard one. I would say the greatest, not in the sense that I'm fond of it, but that I think it is possibly the most interesting one, is that social security systems seem to undercut their own demographic viability.
Mm,
The more generous your social security system is, the fewer kids people have. And the problem is that on an individual level, that's rational, but on a national level, at a system level, you actually need everyone to be having kids because there's no way to keep the system viable without that.
yeah, and it's interesting you picked that one because in say the 1920s and 30s, your retirement plan was that one of your 8 or 10 kids would come home and take care of you, or take you in,
Yep.
right? So whereas now that's no longer the case. All right, Megan McArdle, thank you so much for joining us. Please give out your social handles or somewhere people can find your work if they're interested.
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter at asymmetric info. You can listen to my podcast, Reasonably Optimistic, wherever you get your podcasts, or you can watch it on YouTube. Please like
Mm,
and subscribe. And you can read my columns at WashingtonPost.com.
excellent, excellent. Thank you so much. And for everyone else, thank you for joining the Big Questions with Big John. Hit that like button, subscribe, do what Megan said for her stuff. Do it from our stuff too, okay? Until next time, this is Big John. Peace, everyone.